In other states of distress like psychiatric disorders, anxiety disorders, major depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and also in people, healthy people without a current diagnosis, but who have been exposed to adversity in their childhood. One of the themes you're going to hear tonight is for most of the biomarkers I'm talking about, we find that it's not just adult stress that's linked to poor functioning, but really it's factors in the early environment, like exposure to trauma, that appear to matter and maybe even be more important for our adult health. So in this case, you can see that people who were exposed to child maltreatment, emotional neglect, had shorter telomeres. That's been found several times since this study. We did a study here with Tom Nyland and Aoife O'Donovan looking at people with post-traumatic stress disorder. And so while people with this anxiety disorder did tend to be on the short end on telomeres, when we looked at childhood trauma, we found that that explained the short telomeres even more than the current diagnosis. So you can see that people who had had 4 or 5 exposures to a traumatic event when they were young tended to have shorter telomeres, and then controlling for this made the PTSD finding go away. So that tells us that really what's underlying this difference may be due to early childhood exposures. And the story goes back even further than childhood. We now know that adult health is in part determined by our development in the womb, this what we call prenatal programming. And so we, of course, know that pregnant mom's nutrition matters, but her psychological state matters too. In a study by our colleagues at UC Irvine, Sonia Entringer and Pratik Wadhwa, they did this beautiful study where they had a group of healthy young adults, and they had them interview their mothers about how stressed they were when they were pregnant, and not asking about, how did you feel back then, because that would be hard to remember, but rather, did you have any major life events happen, like did someone die, or did you get divorced? And what they found was that even though all the adults were healthy and non-depressed, the moms who had prenatal stress had offspring who had shorter telomeres as adults. So the comparison group had longer telomeres. And actually just, I think, today, a study came out in chickens that found the same thing. So they stressed out the pregnant mom chickens, and they found that the chicks that came out of the stressed moms had more oxidative stress, more free radicals, more cortisol, so they had more stress hormones, and they had shorter telomeres. So they're coming out different, with a disadvantage that might even last for life in terms of their ability for their immune cells to divide. Owen Wolkowitz at UCSF has been looking at people with major depression, and he's found that chronicity of depression matters. So people who've been depressed for more than, say, 7 years, when you kind of add up all the days of depression across a lifetime, which can get quite high because depression is a chronic, recurrent disorder. So people with maybe one episode of depression didn't have shorter telomeres, but out here, people who had years and years of depression tended to have shorter telomeres. We find that with many, many conditions. Janice Humphreys, who's in the nursing school here, looked at women exposed to domestic violence and found a chronicity effect. The longer they had lived with the abusive partner, the shorter their telomeres.